All right, let's talk about a really powerful mental model called possibility space. Think of it as a tool for mapping out this whole unseen world of choices that shapes, well, pretty much every decision you make.
You know that feeling, right? You're completely stuck, pinned between option A and option B, and it feels like those are the only two choices in the entire universe. It's such a common trap. But here's the thing. It's based on a totally flawed view of reality.
So what if I told you there's a map? And I don't just mean a map that shows A and B. I'm talking about a map that shows C, D, and 1,000 other destinations you haven't even conceived of yet. That map? That's your possibility space. So what exactly is this hidden world of choices? Let's dive in and start by really understanding the space itself. Okay, so at its core, possibility space is the full set of all potential states, paths, and outcomes in any given situation. It's the complete inventory of everything that could happen, not just what's happening right this second. And this brings us to the fundamental difference here. It's the gap between what is true and what can be true. It's all about seeing our current reality as just one single point in a vast landscape of potential.
But, a map of infinite possibilities isn't very useful, is it? To navigate it, we first need to understand its borders, the limits and the dimensions that actually give it some shape.
These boundaries are what separate the feasible from pure fantasy. The feasible is what's possible right now, given your resources, your budget, even the laws of physics. The fantasy is what you can imagine but can't achieve, yet. The key isn't to ignore the fantasy, but to understand precisely where that border lies.
But the most effective innovators don't just accept these boundaries, they actively redraw them. Take Cirque du Soleil. They looked at the whole circus space, took out the animals, and added in high art theater. By changing the borders of what a circus could be, they created an entirely new market where they had no competition at all.
So redrawing borders is one thing, but what about adding entirely new directions to your map? This is where dimensions come in. You can think of dimensions as the degrees of freedom you have to play with.
For years, tech companies competed on a single dimension, hardware specs, who had the faster processor, more memory. Then Apple came along and introduced a second, perpendicular dimension, the app ecosystem. Suddenly, the competition wasn't a line anymore. It was a vast, open plane. And on that new plane, Apple stood completely alone.
Okay, so we have a map with borders and dimensions. Now it's time to fill it with actual points of interest, to populate our universe with options.
This is the expansion phase. The goal is pure generation through what's called divergent thinking. Don't judge the ideas yet, just create as many as possible. The key principle here is that quantity actually breeds quality, because a lot of the time, brilliant ideas are hiding right behind the seemingly bad ones.
And what's the engine that drives this whole explosion of options? Well, it's a field of math called Combinatorics, which is really just the simple art of combining existing elements in new ways. This is where that exponential growth really takes off.
Let me show you how this works. Let's say you start with just 2 basic building blocks.
Now just add 2 more for a total of 4. The number of unique ways you can arrange them doesn't just double, it jumps all the way to 24. That's the power of combinatorial growth.
Now let's scale that way up. In drug discovery, when scientists combine a library of molecules, the number of potential new drugs explodes into a possibility space, estimated at 10 to the 60th power. That's a number larger than all the atoms in our solar system. That is the power of combination.
So, you have this vast populated map. Now the real work begins, the expedition. How do you actually navigate this terrain to find the most valuable spots?
As you start to explore, you face a fundamental dilemma: exploitation versus exploration. Do you exploit what you know works, digging deeper into your current profitable gold mine? Or do you explore new, unknown territory in the hopes of finding a much bigger prize, even if it means risking coming up empty?
This dilemma, it reveals a critical danger, getting stuck on what's called a local optima. Imagine you're climbing in a landscape of hills. You reach the top of one. The view is nice, you're higher than your immediate surroundings, it feels like success.
But the danger is that you can't see the massive mountain just over the horizon. This is exactly what happened to DVD rental companies. They perfected their little hill, optimizing their stores, their late fees, their inventory. But to get to the much higher peak of streaming, they would have had to go down into the valley.
a period of losing money and rebuilding. They refused, and they died on top of their small, irrelevant hill.
This brings us to the final, and maybe the most profound step. The ultimate goal isn't just to explore the map you have, it's to constantly expand the map itself.
See, true sustainable innovation rarely happens by leaping into that fantasy zone we talked about. It happens in a crucial area called the adjacent possible. This is the perimeter of your current reality, the set of all things that have just become possible. It's the next door you can open from the room you're already in.
For example, teleportation is currently in the realm of the impossible, but back in 1990, the invention of the web and better cameras meant that video calls moved out of the impossible and squarely into the adjacent possible. Strategic wisdom isn't about chasing distant dreams. It's about methodically identifying and stepping into what has just become achievable.
So just remember, the map of your possibilities, in your career, your business, or your life, it is not a fixed document. It is a living, breathing thing that you can expand and reshape. The only question left is, where will you redraw the borders?